recording our session. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren, and I am a career coach with Kelley, Indianapolis Career Services. And I'm really excited you're joining me today. What we're going to be doing here is talking about how to utilize your LinkedIn profile. So we're not going to be spending any time on how to build the profile. This is all about the utilization. So if you feel that your LinkedIn profile needs a little bit of love, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be including some directions here in the chat box on how you can schedule an appointment. That way we can look at some of those profiles and see if we can polish them for you as we go through this process here. So our webinar is going to focus on a couple of topics on who you're supposed to be connecting with, where you're going to be finding these people, how you're going to connect to get this response. We're going to look at how you can populate your news feed with some relevant information, how you're going to post, what you should be posting. We're going to look at recommendations and endorsements, and why not, we're going to throw in utilizing some new features on LinkedIn. So we've got a lot we're going to look at today. So in the meantime, please, if you have any questions, I would love for you to get those entered into the chat box. I'll be monitoring this throughout the session. Every 10 minutes or so, I'll be looking at them. And any questions we don't get to, don't worry, at the end, we will have an opportunity for Q&A. So with that being said, thank you all for participating in my poll. We're actually going to end this one and we're going to start another because guess what? I'm going to take us through a really quick pop quiz, which guess what? You are not going to be graded on. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of test our knowledge here on LinkedIn and kind of think about the ways that we might be utilizing it based on these questions. So I'm going to launch the polling in here, and I've got 4 different questions. There are, of course, right answers, and we're going to talk about all of them. But our first question here is, on average, how many jobs are found through networking? And as you look at that, go ahead and answer that question. The other question we're looking at is, after building your profile, employers are going to come to you. Question 3 is asking how many recruiters are using social media and LinkedIn during the job search process, what they're reporting. And question 4 is, you should connect with everyone on LinkedIn, even if you don't know them. And I'm starting to see the responses come through here. We'll go through all of those answers. I'll give you guys just another second to answer any of those questions. It looks like we have a majority of people in here. So for question 1, if you answered 80%, that is correct. That is the number of jobs that networking has somehow either been the most influential factor or utilized in some way, shape, or form. Question 2, if you answered false, you were correct. So you have to utilize this profile in order for people to actually see you. And that's what we're going to do today, is talking about how we can become noticed on LinkedIn. So question 3 here, we were talking about how many recruiters are using social media and LinkedIn. Yes, 93%. If that is what you answered, that is correct. 93% of recruiters are using LinkedIn as their most common way of reaching out, but some other industries too may utilize other forms of social media too. And question 4 here, we were talking about who should you connect with on LinkedIn. If you selected false, you are correct. You should not be connecting with every single person on LinkedIn. We're going to talk about how to be intentional with the people that you connect with here. Thanks for participating in my poll, guys. This is a lot of fun, brings some interaction to our piece. Well, let's move on and let's talk about some of these things and why we should be looking at LinkedIn. But LinkedIn has a lot of advantages, and really the biggest one for all of us is to be accessing what we call the hidden job market. And that's where upwards of these 80% of job opportunities live. So by connecting with different people, you're going to become a known commodity, and that's a good thing. You want people to be seeking you out versus having to go out to find opportunities. Everything that we're going to be talking about today, you are going to be able to utilize with the free version of LinkedIn. There's certainly a couple of perks that you might get with the monthly paid subscription, but I'm going to show you how to utilize the best features with using just the free version. It's always a nice perk with that. So I want to get to this idea of networking and coming back to cultivating the seeds of this relationship. And I want to use the analogy of a garden. It doesn't grow overnight. So we really have to take a lot of time tending and cultivating our plants. And our professional network is exactly the same here. Rushing the process can be really detrimental. And LinkedIn serves as this really beginning point for us to find these relationships and to help build and develop them. And that's how we're going to be spending a lot of our time today, is looking at what that can possibly look like for you. So it starts to beg the question, well, who should I be connecting with? And I want to say that we want to be efficient in this process because our time is valuable and everyone else's time is valuable as well. So when we're being intentional about who we connect with, the search and whether it's a job search or whether we're just building our network, it becomes much more efficient. When people think about who they want to connect with on LinkedIn, the number one response I hear is, well, I'm going to connect with a recruiter. And certainly that is one person that you might be able to connect with, but realize that recruiters tend to receive hundreds of communications every day. And whether that's on LinkedIn or in their email, they're constantly being contacted. So they may not be able to respond to your LinkedIn request either very quickly or at all. And so we're going to look at other people who you want to connect with. So some of these connections, you might start looking for people that have the job title that you want. They could be working at the company that you're looking at. They could be current and past colleagues. We have fellow students and alumni. And we're going to take these people and we're going to classify them into two different categories. I like to call these people the warm connections, those people you already know, and the cold connections, and those are the people that you don't know yet. So when you're talking about connecting with warm connections, you already have a relationship with these people out in the real world typically, and they could be classmates, faculty members, family members. Again, the list could be very extensive. And many times these professionals are personally invested in you in some way. And so if you're new to LinkedIn, connecting with your warm connections should be your number one priority because they already have this relationship with you and they want you to succeed in advance. And therefore, they've got buy-in in order to be active with you on this platform. Now, where we're going to spend the majority of today on, though, is talking about these cold contacts and how we can get them to help us participate in our search, whether that is expanding the network or a job search, for example. And so we want to connect with intention, with the intention being we want to focus what we're doing. And before you ever accept a connection or even send a request, we really should be asking ourselves these three questions. Why am I connecting with this person? If it is simply because I want to expand my network and have all of the connections in the world, that's not a good response. We want to make sure that they actually have some value they're going to bring to us. We want to ask ourselves too, what am I hoping to learn from this person? Are they going to provide some new information that I don't possibly know? And is this person maybe in the role or in the industry I want to pursue? Those three questions can really help narrow the focus down and create some of this criteria we're looking for. And that's where I want to focus on initially. I'm going to come back constantly to this idea of creating target criteria. And some other things you might decide to focus your criteria on are your location you're looking for, that job title we talked about, companies that are intriguing you, industries that are more general that you're pursuing. When you're thinking about your criteria, you have to consider a couple of things. And the two big ones are, what are my top values that I'm considering? And also the priorities that are most important to me. So my target list of criteria for people I'm going to connect with is going to look entirely different than what your criteria might look like. And that's perfectly fine. We want to make sure that it meets our needs and it's most efficient. So start brainstorming this, whether that's during this session or take 20 minutes after today's session to think about why I want to connect with these people. What am I really looking for? So of course, when we're trying to find the right people on LinkedIn, there's a lot of different routes we can go. And I want to first take us down the route of finding connections with our Kelley alumni. And the reason we go into this group and we look at our school pages, I'm going to bump us out here to LinkedIn in just a second, but it's because Kelley alumni are invested in you because Kelleys want to help other Kelleys. It's this nice unspoken rule that we have. And even if you don't know this person, you share a common bond. It's your Kelley experience, the classes, the faculty members. And the nice part is in the future, when you're an alum, you can pass this gift on as well. So it's kind of one of those areas of the gift that keeps on giving. So what I'm going to do here is bump us out to LinkedIn so that way I can show you what this looks like. Give me just a second here. All righty. So on our LinkedIn page, and I'm scrolling up here, you have a couple of things that you can start searching for in the search bar. So we can look for the IUPUI Kelley School of Business. We can simply search for Kelley, the Kelley School of Business, the general page, or we can search for IUPUI. We have a lot of different areas we could go into. I'm going to look at the IUPUI school page and pull that up here for us real quick. And when you're bumped to this page, you're going to find a lot of information, right? So some of this will be talking about the jobs that you might be able to find at the company and so on and so forth. But we're actually interested here in the alumni feature, and it's just here on the left side of the page. So when I click on it, it brings up an entire database. And if you look over here, for example, we have over 105,000 alumni that are part of this network. That's huge. And we can actually search for them in this little bar here by their job title. We can search for them by company if you wanted to. You can also search for them by their graduation year. It's pretty nifty what we can all sort through in this area. If you're not quite sure what you're looking for, if you scroll down, there are some categories here. So if we wanted to just focus in the Indianapolis area, we can sort that number down and it brings us here to 68,000 people. We could look at some of the top companies where they're working. So if we wanted to look at Indiana University Health, now we have 966 alum, and we can continue to narrow and narrow down on this functionality. It's definitely one of my favorite features because it's impossible to know everyone. And in addition to this, people's jobs change and they're very fluid. So you're going to be able to find these connections and when they move as soon as they update their profile here. So now that we have this, I'm actually going to bump us back out to our page here, or to our presentation. Give me just a second. All righty. So we all should be seeing now the PowerPoint slides. If you do not see that, please let me know in the chat. And we'll move on from here. So we've checked out the alumni school pages. I also want to encourage you to check out company pages as well. I've got an example here of a company page that you might decide to look up. So based on this target criteria you create, you may have a list of, 5 or 10 different companies. You should certainly be looking on company pages in order to get connected with those current individuals. And you can notice here, you have, once you land on a company page, you can see up here in the top right corner where you can see all 46 employees that are currently working at this organization, Well Done Marketing, here in Indianapolis. And the cool part is if you have somebody you know who already works there, they'll pop up on this screen too as well. So LinkedIn is actively pulling these individuals so that way you can see that information. And so if I wanted to, I could reach out to Ariel. She's one of my former students, and I could ask her questions about her company if I wanted to. If I wanted to expand outside of her, I also could do that. Now, the search functionality on the company pages looks identical to the alumni page we just looked at. So I'm not going to show you that process again, but you can sort through people again based on job title, location. You can even type in different skill sets that you might be wanting to look at, and that information will then get pulled into your search. Pretty nifty on here as well. One of my favorite pieces there. All righty. Let's move on. So our other area I want to show you too are school groups. We've got lots of different groups, and sometimes even clubs here on campus have their own groups as well. So you may be familiar with these, but a few of them we have is the Kelley School of Business Evening MBA program has their own group. We have the Women in Business at Kelley, Indianapolis. And like I said, the clubs and groups. These are great places to find people, mainly because you might find people you already know, number one, but number two, typically alumni will be part of these groups as well. They usually stay in these groups, and it also allows you to go into a group and post a conversation. So people can post job postings in here. They might post really interesting articles. Anything that you might think could get posted does, and it will then appear in your news feed as well, so people's names will start popping up. This is a good thing that we want to make sure helps our LinkedIn profile be that much more personal and relevant to us. So I stay focused in groups because they have a lot of power, and school groups are one thing, but in addition to that, if you're looking to go into professional groups, you can have that access as well. I looked up a couple here just to give you an example. The Supply Chain Management Group, this is a national organization. They have over 200,000 members in this group. This is a great place to find people, especially if you're trying to network potentially outside of the Indianapolis area, if your job search happens to take you out of the state, for example. If you are wanting to stay more local, this is a huge benefit too, because the Indianapolis community has a lot of specialized groups, and this one was just created not too long ago, maybe about a year, with the Indianapolis Digital Marketing Group. And of course, that's very focused on what's happening within our region and our state. You can connect with individuals as well there. So I'm just checking the chat box to see if we have any questions. I don't see anything. Oh, I just saw one here. So Katie's asking, I received a connection request from a talent acquisition specialist who I don't know. Should I accept? Katie, this is actually a great question because it segues right into sending the right message and whether or not you should connect. And I will encourage you, Katie, to consider what are your goals, your career goals. So is this talent acquisition specialist with a company that you would be interested in pursuing employment with? If the answer is yes, absolutely connect with them. You might need to do some research on who the company is, especially if it's not someone or a company that you're familiar with. It could be something that could spark a conversation. If you do accept the connection, which it sounds like a good one to be connecting with, I encourage you to have a quick phone conversation just to learn about what their priorities are and what they might be hiring for too. Great question, Katie. So Katie's question segues us very nicely into talking about how we send messages to people and whether or not we should be accepting certain requests or not. So in particular, when we're connecting with new contacts, we need to have that list in mind, that defined criteria of who we're connecting with. So that way it informs whether or not we even pursue the connection or accept a connection. I always like to review someone's profile to see whether or not they're going to meet that criteria. And it certainly could be the experience that they've had in the past. If it's a company I'm interested in working for, and so on and so forth. I'm also looking to see when I land on someone's profile if they might be able to introduce me or have someone that I know can introduce me to them. So if you look below here on this screen share where I've pulled under the highlights section, I actually have 13 mutual connections that Beth knows that that they could introduce me to her. This is always a huge benefit, so I highly encourage you to check this, because right now I would probably connect with Megan, one of my contacts, and say, hey, would you introduce me to Beth? I want to get to know her a little bit better, because this creates a much more personal connection versus just sending a cold connection on LinkedIn. In most cases too, your connection is going to happen off the LinkedIn platform, and that will likely include email. And so therefore you're going to have their email address to connect with them. That's a great question. So someone in the chat box says, how do we find their emails for sending connection requests? So when you're on LinkedIn and we're on someone's page, you're going to see this connect button at the top. You'll see I have it circled in yellow. This is the way that you're going to send an email. So it doesn't actually come from like your IU email. For example, you have to use the LinkedIn platform first. And as you start to connect with this person, you may decide to share those work or school emails. It's a great question. Now, if you don't have any connections who can introduce you to a new contact, but you said, I've determined this is a valuable contact and I want to move forward with them, that's where you're going to press that blue connect button, so that way we can go to the top of the profile. So we're going to move on here really quick to sending what it means, a meaningful message. So LinkedIn gives you two options. When first you click connect with somebody, it gives you the option to just send a generic connection to someone. And this generic connection actually says, I'd like to add you to my LinkedIn network. And it's very generic. It doesn't say anything about who you are or what you're trying to get out of the conversation. So in order to make these more customized messages, you need to click add a note. And this is where you're going to want to address two basic ideas. Who am I and why I want to connect? So I want to show you what this looks like and what some good connection messages might consist of. So here's one that says, Dear Steve, I see that you graduated from their current university. I'm an aerospace engineer and would love to hear more about your work at NASA. I'm going to be in your area in a few weeks for vacation. If you have time, I'd love to meet up. There's a couple of reasons as to why I like this. Number one, it makes an immediate connection to our shared experience, the school that they attended. That's some kind of bond that they can share. It tells what they want out of the relationship. They want to gain more information about their work at NASA, and it gives the person a reason to respond. So in this case, hey, I'm going to be in your area. I want to make sure that we can have a connection here. It's super personal too. So when you look at the bottom, it says, hey, did you watch Saturday's game against Stanford? That last quarter was so tense. There's that personal connection that says, I have invested time into this and I really want to hear from you. Let's look at another example here. And this one says, Dear Ron, I'm also part of the Society of Professional Journalists, and I really enjoyed reading your posts. So this person found this individual through a group. The piece that you shared a week ago about the future of data journalism was pretty thought-provoking, and I'd love to keep in touch and learn more about your work. The reason I like this one, there's a compliment in it. We're saying, hey, I see you as an expert in the field, and I want to learn more about what you do. She shares how she found out about his information and his really great writing. And of course, she wants to connect and learn more about what he has to do or what he has available. So this last one that I want to show you is a cold connection message that works really well too. So this is someone who is a college senior who has been admiring some person's work here. And they really love this ad campaign that they saw that had gotten published in a group. So yet another reason to join a group. And they ask if they can have 20 minutes of their time to learn about what they're doing in the field and what skills they find are relevant. Again, you can probably tell why I like it. They're flattering them a little bit with their work. They're saying, hey, I see you as an expert. I want to have time on your hands, or time to be able to discuss this. It's a nice message that people then want to respond to. Now, if you're looking for some other ways that you might want to send some different messages, I'm going to include something here in the chat box. And I promise I'm not ignoring those messages. I see them up there. We're going to get to them here in a second. But here's an article that I suggest reading here. If you want more people to accept your LinkedIn requests, use some of these templates. We've looked at 3 of them, but there's a bunch more that you're going to be able to utilize. So I want to get back to someone's question here. So I've seen some people put hiring against their LinkedIn profile. Does that mean the individual is hiring and would be willing to help get me an interview? Ooh, we're going to talk about this in just a second here. In most cases, that probably means that they are hiring. So they are looking to evaluate candidates, to share a little bit more about their company. We're going to look at that here in a second. So certainly that can be a good cue. It's obviously gotten you to engage with them, and that's what they want. So the last question here, talking about if the connection has email restriction, do we have a database to find IU emails? I might have to answer that question in a one-on-one. So why don't you email that to me, and I'll include my email address in here, because that way we can get the correct answer to you. All righty. So just a couple of things to go over. Some messaging good moves, right? We've talked about asking for advice, letting them know they're experts, asking for really short amount of time to start the connection, right? If I could just have 20 minutes of your time for a phone call, that's all it's going to take to build the relationship. And then finally, letting the connection choose their method of connecting. So for some of us, that might mean that I'm most comfortable in the phone or in a virtual setting on a first connection, and then I might decide to move to in-person as I get to know them. So it just depends upon how that individual wants to move forward. Now, another thing to realize is that messages are not just for people that you don't know. You should really be doing this with everybody. And so I encourage you, if you would like, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and you can practice doing a message here on what it means to introduce yourself and to send a very personal message to someone. So feel free to do that. I'd be happy to connect with you. And I did see someone raise their hand there, so feel free to ask any questions in the chat box there. That's how we'll be able to communicate today. A few things I want to have you be aware of. When you're sending messages, you're going to realize that in none of those messages did any person ask directly for a job. Now, in a case where you might be looking and working with a recruiter, the conversation may come up. But if you're connecting with anyone outside of the recruitment world, asking directly for a job is not going to be the way that they want to connect with you. Now, some people will go straight into a connection and then go way too quickly from I want to get to know you to I need help. So there's almost no in between. You have to be really careful again about cultivating the relationship. There's a little bit of time that has to get spent in the getting to know you phase. The other thing to remember too is that you have something to bring to the table. And so you should be offering your expertise to people. And so maybe you're skilled at something like social media marketing, you're really good at financial analysis, maybe you started your own business. I want you to take these into consideration that you also have something to provide other people. Oh, Vincent has a great question in the chat box. I have social anxiety and I have a hard time starting conversations. Any advice on how to deal with that and appear confident when connecting with people? My biggest advice, Vincent, is to say, create some questions before you go into these conversations. Maybe it's a list of 10 questions, so that way you have a path to start on. And so it's not just going into this and feeling really anxious and not being prepared. That's part of it. But you also have to realize that these people are just as nervous when they connect with you. So being really upfront about what you want out of the conversation will be helpful. I've had people that want to connect with me that were not very clear with that. And so even for someone that's outgoing like myself, I was nervous because I didn't really know what they wanted out of the conversation. So it's all about being confident, and it's preparation ahead of time is a big chunk of that. All righty. So we are going to move on to our next topic, but please keep those questions coming. We will address any connection questions that you might have once we get to the end, especially with our Q&A coming up. So I talk about populating your news feed because this is really, really important, guys. When we want to make LinkedIn useful to us, it has to match our career goals and what we are going to find meaningful. And so if you're not going, LinkedIn is not going to be something you want to utilize if it's not useful to you, which is what most people do. They create the profile and they kind of fall off the bandwagon because it doesn't fit their needs. And we're going to then take some time to create a profile that is useful to us. So for example, we're going to look at following industry influencers as a way to populate our news feed. And of course, we hear this term influencers. It can be used in a lot of different contexts, but industry influencers in particular are the ones that are keeping you up to date about what's happening in their industry. They're very well known. They usually have lots of years of experience. And so if you don't have a lot of experience in this particular industry, or for example, you're trying to change industries, this is someone that you really want to follow. LinkedIn influencers serve as that learning tool almost. Things that you might learn from these people: industry terms, expectations of employers. You might learn what it takes to be successful in a job, maybe credentials or experience that you might need to have in order to be considered. And again, it comes back to this idea at the beginning: do these influencers fit the criteria of our career goals that we've set aside in the beginning? What do you want to learn? Are those people going to be able to provide that information? I certainly have influencers that I have followed, unfollowed, refollowed, and added new people. So this idea of having just one influencer that will be in your news feed will likely actually be 5 or 6 people potentially. So when I look for industry influencers, this is not rocket science. This is something that we are going to be looking at with Google. So I literally Googled LinkedIn industry influencer and I inserted an industry. And so when we have that industry in there, it'll help us with that information. Yep, and someone just asked, are we sharing the screen? It is sharing, so hopefully you're able to see it. Okay, good, he's able to see it now. So I want to show you an example of industry influencers. So Kelley Saunders is an industry influencer in the supply chain and logistics industry. So this was an industry I had decided to Google. I was more interested in learning about it. And her profile popped up here as someone I should look at in this article. So I follow the link out, and you're going to be able to follow Kelley as opposed to just connecting with her. And that means all of the posts that Kelley puts out there, we're going to be able to see. So if she says, oh, my company is hiring, or you guys should be paying attention to this information, this is going to be a new up and coming trend, Kelley's letting us know about that. And that populates your news feed with things that are going to be interesting to you. Now, we had talked about company pages. So company pages here provide us a lot of information. First of all, we could find the employers, right? Are the people that are employed at the company. There's job postings on here. You can even see all of the posts that they have down at the bottom. So if you look down here underneath their title, you'll see all of that listed there. But as opposed to just having to constantly go back to the company page, you can follow it. And that way, again, it populates in the news feed. And that's really important for us. It gives us a way to do some preliminary research on here. So again, the job board can be super helpful if you're looking for positions, if the company is utilizing it in that way. All righty. So we're going to move on here to the idea of posting on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a social network, and so we need to have a profile that's active and it's being used. It's just like creating a Twitter handle and not utilizing it. So therefore, it's not going to be useful to anybody except for maybe you if you are just scrolling through to look at things. But posting on LinkedIn is a way to contribute, for example. And we really need to engage with the platform because that's how LinkedIn rewards you. And let me tell you what I mean by getting rewarded. So when LinkedIn rewards active users, a couple of things happen. First of all, your profile actually appears higher in searches. And so when you say, well, what does that mean with searches? Recruiters on the back end of their profile have a very different setup of LinkedIn than what we have as a public view. And so when they want to search for someone who has expertise in a certain area, they can actually data mine that, and the people that start to appear higher in those searches are those who are active users. So this is a huge, huge advantage that you can take advantage of. And so the other thing that happens is your profile starts to appear in other people's news feeds. So your first, second, and third connections, people are going to start seeing your name. Guess what? You start to become a known commodity. This is a really good thing. People also start to recognize you as an expert. So if you're starting to share things in your LinkedIn page, we're going to get to that here in a second, people are going to be excited about it. Plus, you're going to say, I'm really easy to reach because you can always find me on here. When we're talking about activity, I want you to think about starting small. So if that means that you're just logging into LinkedIn once a week, and then step it up from there. For some of us, that might be, I have to log in bi-weekly. Figure out a system that works for you so that way you can build up what this activity looks like. So if I've convinced you, it's really behooves you to post, I do want you to start small, and the easiest thing you can do is liking and commenting on posts. Liking is the easiest. Commenting needs to be more insightful. So if you're not adding anything to the conversation, you're just saying that was a really interesting article, that's really not enough content for someone to evaluate who you might be, even think about the expertise you might be bringing to the table, or new ideas that you might have. Now, some of us might decide that we want to post articles. So these are things that are already written that we want to share with our group. I guarantee everyone in this class or in our LinkedIn webinar has had a class where you have been given an article to read. And these are awesome to be able to share with your colleagues on LinkedIn. So your instructors are doing you a favor already and providing you the content. This is a really great way to utilize it. If you're part of professional associations, they often have blogs, and so that's a great place to get content as well. I love the local Chamber of Commerce. Indy Chamber of Commerce is always posting content, and so therefore I'll post that stuff even. Posting articles are nice, and I encourage you to take it to the next level where you encourage other people to engage in the post. So I've got a little example down there. I just read about the new economic development plan from the State House. What do you guys think? It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, and it tells people that, hey, I want you to participate in my conversation too. Now, hashtags are really great. And the reason I like them so much is because hashtagging allows it to get outside of your community. So when you post, this is really just going to your first connections, those who you have connected with. But once you hashtag it, if people start to search on that hashtag, your post will come up. So this is yet another way to reach out to a wider audience if that's who you're trying to reach. So if you're already doing that, kudos. but I encourage you, you can always take it to the next level. Something I'm going to put in the chat box here really quick is how you can follow different hashtags on LinkedIn. When you follow these hashtags, this actually populates your newsfeed again with relevant content, and it gives you information that you could then, of course, share in the future. So it's another way that you can increase your activity with the profile. Additionally, too, you can also write your own posts. And this can be something as easy as, this is what I did today in school. So for all of us who are transitioning now to online classes, maybe you write a post on how that transition has been going, and you encourage other people to interact with that. Maybe you're doing something cool at work, or because of today's climate, maybe you're doing something different that you never had to do before. Add that to the conversation. Every time I'm at a training, I'm posting about that. I want people to know what I'm doing. If you can, utilize photos. Obviously, we're very visual creatures, so the more that you can utilize that, the more attraction that is going to be given to your post. Of course, it's a social network, so it makes sense to be able to use those kind of visual aids to guide people into the conversation. I want to give a couple of examples of what our students are currently doing. So this is one of our master's students, and she posted about working on, or completing rather, one of the LinkedIn learning courses, time management working from home. So that was really neat to be able to see. You have her visual element there. That's really nice. In addition to that, just as a side note, LinkedIn has made their e-learning courses free for the next 2 or 3 months. So if you want to take advantage of those, they usually cost, and now they don't. So take advantage of that. She certainly did. This is one of my colleagues, Suzanne, and she posted something here not too long ago either, about an opportunity to join a conversation. So this was an event aimed at marketing professionals on how they might be dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic that we're currently in. And she wanted to share that with her group. So this is another great way that you can contribute content. And I'll be honest, this share probably didn't take her any more than a minute. And that's because it was literally a reshare of something someone had put out there. So that's a great example of how you might be able to utilize that. Now, everything we've talked to up to this point has been about how you can utilize LinkedIn. Of course, we're talking about populating the newsfeed, connecting with people. The two topics I'm going to talk about next, which is job searching. These are kind of perks that you're going to be utilizing in your job search if that's the way you need to be utilizing this system. So, for example, we have something about setting job alerts. So if you are actively in the search, I'm going to include 2 links, and you can get notifications. So those notifications can come to you in different ways. So for example, you can get them sent to you in a daily email digest. I've even seen people get an email every time something actually got posted. So you have a lot of ways that you could set that. Additionally, if you would like, and this is a big if, you can let recruiters know that you're available for searching. And I included something again in the chat box on how to set that availability. For some of us, this will not make sense. But if you are in a job search and you don't mind that people either know that you're looking, or maybe you're a senior and you're looking for opportunities, you can set this in your LinkedIn profile, and a little green dot is going to go next to your name, and it'll let recruiters know that you're active in the job search. Now, for some of us, this is not going to make sense at all. So therefore, you would not utilize this. This is just yet another way that you can bolster your profile. If you're choosing not to let recruiters know you're available, you're just going to use every other tactic that we've talked about. And someone had a question, are you adding the links? Yes, they are all in the chat window right now. And I'll be sending those out too after we share the recording. Now, a few other useful features that I want to show you about. I told you we were going to talk about recommendations. We're definitely going to do that here. I encourage everyone to give recommendations on LinkedIn because it's a powerful way, number one, to showcase your leadership skills, the dedication to employee development. It's basically a walking recommendation letter. So if you write a recommendation for someone, here's the benefit to you. If they accept it, you're going to start to receive more views to your profile. And when people are starting to click on that, it's because they're saying, oh, I want to see who gave this referral. So it's kind of a win-win on both ends. The person's going to get a really nice recommendation. You're going to get even more traffic driven to your profile. The same thing really happens when we endorse people for skills. So for example, I am going to include some information in here about giving and requesting recommendations, so that way you can have all of the access to that. And you can see I have on here a few that I've given and a few received. So those are always nice to bolster that resume. Now I want to talk a little bit about endorsing skills. So when you go through and endorse the skills, it's the same concept. This platform should not be about give, or take, take, take. It needs to be a give and take. So as you go out and endorse other people for skills, again, people's names appear next to the skill endorsement that you're giving them, which is nice. It draws people to your profile. But in addition to that, it also just shows that you are willing to be an active participant on LinkedIn and you're invested in other people, which is one of the bigger points on recommendations and endorsing, is that it's not all about me, it's about everyone, which is the way you should be approaching it. Now, in addition to this, when we talk about endorsing, there's something new on LinkedIn. It's called Take a Skill Quiz. You'll see this appear right there underneath skills and endorsements. This is brand new. LinkedIn has been testing this out for the last 6 months and now has rolled it out. But these are different skills quizzes that you can take. They are free and they assess you on different skills. So for example, you can take an Excel skills quiz and that will then appear on your profile if you pass. It's 15 or 20 different multiple choice questions, and it tests you on a skill, and it's typically one that is a technical skill. So for the most of the skills exams, you're going to see things like Microsoft Office, for example. You might see QuickBooks in there. Those tend to be what is in there now, not so much the soft skills that we typically see. So that's a really great feature. It endorses your profile. It shows the activity that you're taking on there. And guess what? An employer rolls to your profile and sees that you have the skills and you've demonstrated them. Even better. So one of the last features I want to show you is just, of course, download the app, right? But once we all get to go back into the world where we get to hang out with people in networking situations, when you have the app open, you're going to see up in the top search bar on the far right, there's something I've circled there. It's a little graphic. And this allows you to actually share your own, what they call a code. And this code then can be scanned and you can access the person's profile like very quickly. That I like this because you don't have to fumble around on your LinkedIn app trying to see if you spelled the person's name right. It makes the interaction go much faster. You can see up on the LinkedIn code area, you can toggle between that and you can actually get the scanner open, so that way you can both kind of flip-flop. Somebody has the code, somebody scans, and vice versa. It's kind of a nice feature. Once, like I said, we get back into so when we get to see everybody in person, that's a really cool feature. So finally, I just want to say, connect with our Kelley Indianapolis Career Services LinkedIn profile. I post things on here all the time. My team does as well, articles, resources, different announcements. You can also tap into our connections. That's always a nice thing. I'm going to include a link here in the chat box so that way you can access that. And of course, practice good messaging etiquette, and you can message me on here and I will respond to that too as well. So that's super nice. All righty. Just my final piece here. If you need help improving your profile, absolutely schedule a meeting with me. I would be very, very happy to talk with you. LinkedIn profiles are, of course, just like resumes, very subjective, and we also are going to say very personal, right? None of them are ever the same, and so let me help you work through that so we can get all of that information up to speed. Now, I do want to open it up to questions. I'm going to go back. I know there was one question that I missed, so I'm going to scroll through and see if I can find it. Here, the question was, as you had mentioned earlier, recruiters probably get hundreds of requests with personal notes. How do you stand out to get their attention? Really great question. And I will say that you might decide not to go for the recruiter first. So if you want to go work at Salesforce, for example, you might decide to talk to somebody in the department you want to work in. And so that way you build a relationship with them, and then you ask to get passed to a recruiter personally. So that can help you bypass that need to just go straight to the recruiter first. I will say, having worked as or with recruiters, they say that they take those personal recommendations from people they've already hired. And so therefore they're going to say, oh, my employee knows exactly what they're talking about. They know what it takes to be successful. I'm going to take their recommendation of this person that they've been speaking with. So try going that back route. That might be a way that you, especially for companies that are very large and they get a lot of inquiries, you know, like your Microsofts and Googles of the world, you have to be a little more creative with the way you engage with them. So we still have some time. Feel free to answer any questions. I think that was the only one I missed. If it wasn't, please include it again in the chat box. I'm just double checking here to make sure that we've got everybody. And I know this has taken, you know, a big chunk of your time. So thank you so much for participating. It's always a lot of fun to be able to show you guys how to utilize the profile. It's new, it's exciting. And LinkedIn, of course, in today's environment is a necessary thing to be able to have in order to make these connections, in particular when we're social distancing and we can't go to someone's office and see them. All righty. Well, I do see a lot of people signing out, so that's perfectly fine. I know you have places to go, people to see, or maybe not places to go. But I will stay here for the next 7 or so minutes, and I'll just monitor the chat while we're waiting for any of those questions. But in the meantime, shoot me an email, connect with us on LinkedIn. I'm really excited to be able to share this journey with you. I'm really glad that you all could join me. All right, I see a couple of questions popping in. So the first one being, how do we successfully connect with professionals and alumni and developing the meaningful relationships? Absolutely. So I think a lot of this comes back to making sure that your criteria are being met. So when you're connecting with different professionals and alumni, are they meeting some of those things you're looking for? So if they have a certain professional credential and you want to know how to get that and they have it, that's someone you should be connecting with. That's what makes a relationship meaningful. But on the flip side, when you're talking about what makes a relationship meaningful to the other person, you should be providing something as well. And so some of that is just good old back and forth dialogue about, tell me about your day. I'm interested in knowing a little bit about how you got started in the company. You want people to talk about themselves. And so meaning really comes from the time that you invest into it, and questions that aren't just surface level. So I want to know more about your company. That's a good question, but it could be better if you start developing it and saying, I saw your company is doing X, Y, and Z with these new clients. Tell me what your role is in that. And that changes the dynamic completely. Oh, this is a really great question from Michael. I'm supposed to start an internship with Northwest Mutual. Part of the internship is conducting market surveys to build prospective client lists, I presume. Yes, and so you're 100% right. You could definitely use LinkedIn in this capacity. That's what he's asking. 100%. Now, one thing that you might want to decide as you're starting to develop this client list is you're going to use your recommendations differently, Michael. So for example, you might decide that you're going to ask clients to write recommendations on your behalf about your work versus a supervisor, for example, to write something about what you're doing. So definitely you can utilize that. Again, make sure you're not spamming people. So you're going to be personalizing these messages to them. You're going to say, I noticed that you are working in this industry and that's something that I can help specialize in. That's a personal connection versus just sending something generic out. Good question. Someone else asked if you can have my email. Yes, I'm sharing it right now. And it looks like that's all of our questions, unless you have something else. The last thing I'm going to share, it's like one of them is having trouble in the chat box. And yes, there is a question about, will all of this be sent out? Yes, it will be. Yep. Sorry you're not able to see anything. I've sent a message to you directly. We'll see whether or not that works. Here's how you can make an appointment with me. Again, just going to kelleycareersonline.com. You got the app too that you can go directly to. If that's not working, email us. We will make that work for you. We've just got a couple more minutes to answer any more questions that you might have. And I have to say, my phone is blowing up right now, guys. I'm getting lots and lots of LinkedIn requests from you. Fantastic. Keep those coming. Keep sending those personal messages. That's going to be one of the ways you can stand out to people no matter who you connect with. Could be connecting with your mom, and that's going to make you stand out. It's going to be very personal and very, very engaging for them. All righty. Well, it does look like that we are done with questions. I'm going to go ahead and end our session today. Thank you again so much for joining me. If you have questions, you have my email in that chat box. Please feel free to email me with any follow-ups. Thanks again for attending, guys. And I hope to see you all in the future.